let's get into the story. Let's have some tough conversations that are going to ruffle some few feathers, but hopefully it leads to peace, prosperity, and the safety and security everyone's looking for. So today I woke up and I saw that the Notre Dame Cathedral was burning in Paris. So it's on fire. The spire fell on top of the whole building. It's a really tough sight, and it even seems very symbolic of what I would consider the fall of Europe and Western civilization. I'm not saying we're falling and it's going to fall, but we're making a lot of mistakes in many ways. We're going to talk about that. So it's just awful. I mean, that's obvious. It's not good. Even if you're not religious, it's a historic building, and people like it. I mean, it's never good when buildings burn, especially something that's historic like that. Anyway, so we know it's on fire, and the story now is that it was possibly a mistake. Somebody's saying it's an arson. I'm not going to jump to conclusions, but I'm going to look at all the data on what's going on in France and Europe and in the world in general, and we could kind of speculate without being political or rude about it. So first off, I want to say it's the Holy Week, so there's that. Also, this comes from Newsweek. I shared it earlier. Catholic churches are being desecrated across France, and officials don't know why. This was March 21st, 2019. So just under a month ago, Newsweek, which is more left-leaning news publication, ran the headline, "Catholic churches are being desecrated across France, and officials don't know why." I wonder why. Is it because you're, I don't know, not really vetting your immigrants like they do here, illegal immigration, refugee immigration? Of course, I want to help people, but when you bring in different cultures, you want to make sure that the culture is buying into the country as opposed to not buying in. And I'm no detective, but I could guess why Catholic churches are being desecrated. It's not that hard to figure out. In general, I want to read an express.co.uk headline. 10 incidents of vandalism happened. This is like similar stuff. They just got more into detail about what was happening last month. Attacks on churches, desecrations of altars, defacing of Christ, and human excrement spread across walls. 10 incidents. So they've seen a huge uptick in Catholic churches. The reason I'm saying this is not to politicize it. I'm simply saying, and I'm not trying to jump to conclusions I don't know, but I mean, when you have a bunch of Catholic churches being desecrated and then the biggest one burns, or one of the most historic ones burns, it's hard to think that that doesn't have something to do with it. Also, if you look at France, there's the Yellow Vest protests that have been going on for months now. If you guys haven't heard of that, it's called Yellow Vest or Gilets Jaunes. I don't know. I'm not French. I don't know how to say it. A bunch of people put on yellow vests because they all don't like the president. Some people say it's a rebellion against the banks. Some people say it's a rebellion against mass immigration. Some people say it's a rebellion against the climate tax and just high taxes in general, and the fact that workers are not being treated well. Point being, no matter what you think it is, there are protests going on. I mean, between 70 to 80% of the public doesn't support their own president. The left doesn't like him, the right doesn't like him, the far right doesn't like him, the far left doesn't like him. He has no leadership. And the saddest part is people like Rihanna and Obama told everybody to vote for him, and they said, the news was saying, wouldn't it be great if we had our own Macron? And point being is he can't really handle the city. So the reason I'm bringing all this up is because I'm just using my brain. Pretty much every weekend now, it seems like France is burning. It's like, oh, it's an electrical reason, it's the Yellow Vest protest, it's this, it's a terror attack, it's that. Seems like France is in turmoil. I'm sure it's still a beautiful, great place. I'm not saying that, but are we supposed to believe that this is a random fire when you have, 10 attacks on churches and then you have Yellow Vest burning stuff every weekend? Like, no, this just burned and we burn every weekend and there's no correlation there. It's like, give me a break. Also, I want to say there's multiple, in my mind, once again, not to politicize it, just being honest, there's multiple people who don't like churches and who would probably celebrate this. And I'm using actual facts and data here. I'm not using my own mind. The first group is what I know a lot of people here want me to say, although I'm very defensive of them in many ways when people lie, which is, the Islamic ideology. Not all Islamic people, of course, not all Muslims, God bless you guys, but and I have a lot of friends who, of course, are mourning this loss of the church too, but a lot of the refugees that France and Britain and Sweden and all these, Germany, they didn't bring in the best of the Islamic world. And even I have friends from Pakistan who say their good friends who are Muslim can't come to the United States, and family members, because we do a lottery system. We don't do merit-based. We don't vet like we used to. We just close our eyes and roll the dice and take in millions of people. So we're not getting the best people from the Islamic world, and a lot of them are in France. So the reason I'm saying this is not to blame them for the attack, but I noticed Paul Joseph Watson posted something, and he showed that a bunch of people with Islamic names were cracking up and laughing at the cathedral burning. So I don't think it's that crazy or edgy to say that there's many Islamic people, especially in France, UK, Germany. Not all of them. I'm never going to blame everyone. I say Muslims are not a monolith. No religion's a monolith, and I say that all the time, and people get mad, but it's true. You can't blame the whole religion, but there's, somebody that could possibly do it. Also, atheists, and once again, not all atheists. I have a lot of atheist friends that are very, very awesome, and they would never do this. But just recently in the United States, you had a church burning from somebody who was like a super atheist black metal person. And once again, I'm going to see a friend tomorrow who's an atheist into metal, but he's a great guy. I'm not blaming all atheists or all people who buy into metal, because a lot of metal people are like really progressive and good people. I'm just saying that I did notice just with my own eyes, I witnessed, people in those two groups celebrating the burning of this cathedral. I just saw it. They were like, thank goodness this is burning. I'm not saying that's for sure, but I'm just saying it seems like those are two groups. Communists, very angry atheists, and Islamic people are among people I saw that were celebrating this. But I'm not, once again, I have to say this 100 times because everything I say gets misconstrued. I'm not blaming all people. It's just like when the whole country is set on fire every single weekend, and there's fires and desecrations of Christ and cathedrals like every week. Just March 17th, 2019, this is under a month ago, Paris historic Saint Sulpice Church caught on fire. It's like the whole city seems like it's on fire. It's been on fire for a year, so it's hard for me to not be like, oh no, it's just a mistake. The builders just set it on fire. Did the builders start the Yellow Vest movement? Did the builders, bring in mass immigration? That doesn't seem like it's very compatible with Europe. Point being, something's going on, and I'm going to get into some other stuff in a second. Hold on. But my problem, and I get what progressives and left-wing people are saying, is if the wars didn't start in America and Saudi Arabia and Israel and France and Europe and UK weren't doing all this stuff, a lot of this wouldn't happen in the first place. And partially I do agree with that. It's like we do have to start with ourselves and make sure that we're not doing the wrong thing. And one thing I've been referencing a lot recently is in 2014, I believe, I don't know if that's the right date, but LA Times published an article that said that the CIA was funding one side of a war and the Pentagon was funding one side of the war. Tulsi Gabbard, who I'm going to talk about later, and many others, including even, partially President Trump at one point, said that we were funding extremists ourselves. So if we really hate extremists and radical people of this religion, like I dislike completely, we have to make sure as a country that our leaders and our Congress and our president and our Secretary of State isn't funding jihadi, Wahhabist, extremist terrorists. That's part of the problem for sure. And especially in Syria and Libya, there's a lot of lies. But, however, where I differ from progressives and liberals is they close their eyes and say, oh yeah, it's our fault, it's my fault. So we're just going to blindly take in a bunch of people from the Islamic world and we're just going to assume that they want to be compatible with the US and Europe. And it's just not true. Just to give you an example, in not all, but many Islamic countries that are a majority Islamic, and no disrespect to them, you could do what you want to do. It's not really up to me. I don't care, and I don't disrespect it. They don't treat the LGBT community well at all. I think it's Brunei or whatever the name of that city is. You go to most majority Muslim countries, they don't like the LGBTs. I'm sorry, they don't like the L's, they don't like the G's, they don't like the B's, they don't like the T's, they don't like the Q's. That's not their culture. So the irony and the hypocrisy and maybe the paradox of all of this is left-wing people in Europe and the United States are so obsessed with Islamic immigration and they hate anybody who criticizes it, and they want to bring in people in a lottery system. They don't want to vet. They don't want to have a travel ban. They call it a Muslim ban, even though it's not a Muslim ban. It's all the countries. And the irony behind it is, not all, of course, but anytime there's a Islamic majority in a country, most of the time they have very, very strict LGBT laws, and at best, they're not nearly as pro-LGBT as the United States. So the paradox of it all is liberals spend all their time fighting conservative Christian white European men, and the tragedy of it all, it's like a tragedy and a comedy like most great plays. The tragedy is they're going to suffer the most from the immigration that they're desperate to bring in. They're bringing in a culture that treats them worse than the people that they hate in their own country. It's a tragedy and a comedy at the same time. And in general, in Europe, this seems to be the case. I have friends from Syria, and I asked them, I said, Treka, how many of these Islamic immigrants that came through via the refugee crisis in Syria, how many of them do you think are either pro-ISIS, in ISIS, or sympathetic to Al-Qaeda, ISIS, al-Nusra, all of these, extremist terrorist organizations? And he said, a lot of them. He couldn't give me a specific number, but he said, I'll tell you, being in Syria and seeing, the people that fled to France, Germany, and Europe, it's not all Muslims. All Muslims shouldn't have to deal with this. However, because of liberals not having common sense or being so naive and foolish and hateful and so desperate to embrace a culture which doesn't embrace their own liberal values, now they're starting to suffer the consequences in Europe of bringing in millions of people where, say, 10, 20, 30% of them are, 40% of them are sympathetic to ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and al-Nusra. That's millions of people, at least hundreds of thousands of people on your hands, that are sympathetic to that. Someone said you all suck. Maybe you didn't hear the beginning of this because I'm getting into a lot of uncomfortable stuff here. But point being, we have, outside of this cathedral attack, I already said I don't know who did it. It could have been 50 million people. It could have been nobody. It could have been an error. I want to use this to talk about Europe and the United States because not only a symbolic falling, but also we have to face these uncomfortable truths to really solve the problems that we have in all of our communities. I have Christians getting mad at me, Jews getting mad at me. To be honest, Muslims almost never get mad at me. Thank you, Muslims. I appreciate that. But in general, it's like everyone wants to get mad at me. I'm not saying these things to throw anybody under a rug. I'm saying it to have these uncomfortable talks so we can actually all live peacefully however we want, because in Islamic countries, they don't like LGBT stuff. But LGBT liberals want to bring Islamic people to their countries and don't realize, like in UK and France, that they don't really agree with it in mass numbers. I'm not saying everyone, but all. And in France, you have a leader who wants to bring in refugees, doesn't pay the working class, doesn't want to talk to his own people, doesn't want to confront these truths. And the truth is, outside of this cathedral burning, I don't know what happened, there are real-life consequences to this stuff. This is another, reference here. Terrorist fence built around the Eiffel Tower. So recently, they needed to build a bulletproof thing around the Eiffel Tower. They're suffering real consequences. Europe is suffering real consequences. UK is suffering consequences. France is suffering consequences. Sweden is suffering consequences. And they don't want to talk about it. That's fine. And my problem with the right wing, now I know I'm going to make everybody uncomfortable this time. I don't really care. That's the part I'm trying to explain to the left wing, is outside of this cathedral thing, you have to understand you're smashing cultures together that don't want to coexist together, including the people that you bring in don't necessarily agree with your liberal ideology, and you're trying to force it onto people and not address problems and not use common sense, strong policies when it comes to immigration and also laws, law and order. It's Europe is suffering, and nobody wants to talk about it. I don't care. Now I want to talk about things that bother me with the right wing a little bit when it comes to this same stuff, because I want to talk about today. I don't talk about it very often, but I want to talk about Christianity and Christian in media. I'm not trying to politicize it. I didn't say 50 million times. I didn't say they did it. I'm just saying it's just suspicious. Everything's burning, and I'm supposed to act like it just burned itself down. But I just want to have this conversation. So when it comes to mass media in the United States of America, probably in Europe too, I can't speak for that. I'm not as familiar. Almost no mass media is Christian. I got attacked on Twitter all day. This shouldn't be that controversial of a statement. There's almost no Christian values in mass media when it comes to like Christian ideology. It just doesn't exist. I mean, so much so to the point that Unplanned. There's a movie called Unplanned Movie, which is a Christian-based movie based on abortion and talking about third trimester abortion, first trimester abortion. Basically, it's a Christian movie trying to save babies that have heartbeats, limbs, fingers, arms, can breathe, can move, can see light, can feel. That's what the movie's about. Unplanned Movie in the United States media was treated like a propaganda terrorist movie. They got censored, they got hated on, they got silenced. Guys, for a country that was based off Christian values and a country that claims to be Christian, something is profoundly wrong with our media. I don't care if you're Muslim, you know it too. I don't care if you're Jewish, you know it too. If you're Christian or Catholic or atheist, you know it. Something is profoundly wrong with our media, and almost none of our media is Christian. It's just not. I'm sorry. There's a very small percentage of our media that's influenced by Christian. So I said this, and this is what annoys me with right-wingers and people who claim to be on my side, even though I don't really have a side, whatever, is I say this stuff and I get attacked. What I said on Twitter today, in a few words, is I said most of our media is either Jewish-owned, atheist, leftist-owned, or Islamic influenced. My friend Mike Cernovich did a whole documentary called Blood Money. I have to watch it, but he's talking about a lot of foreign influence on media. There's a lot of influence. There's a lot of Chinese influence on media too. I should have grouped that in. But it's like the amount of Jewish influence in media and Jewish ownership in media is pretty huge, considering that they're only 1% to 2% of the population. I'm not hating. I'm not disrespecting. I'm not inciting violence. I'm not anti-Semitic. It's just a fact. I mean, you look at everyone hates CNN so much. They're like, oh my God, CNN's horrible. It's so bad. Look who owns it. I'm not saying that it's all Jewish people's fault, but if we want to talk about statistics, the same right-wingers who get mad at me for saying that will nonstop blame all Muslims for everything and talk about, crime and how it's like 12% of the population doing 50% of the crime. I'm not blaming all groups. I'm never doing that. I fight against hate from all sides, and I take a lot of heat from it. But what I'm saying is the entire media is left-wing. A lot of atheist godlessness in our media. There's a lot of Jewish ownership in our media. There's a lot of Chinese communist influence in our media. And there's a lot of Islamic now growing influence in our media, including Al Jazeera, which is owned by Qatar. You want to talk about foreign influence? It's not just like an Islamic American. It's like an Islamic country influencing our media. I say this stuff. I get attacked. People say, I'm anti-Semitic. I'm this, I'm that. I'm not saying that. The reason I'm saying this is our country was founded on Christian values. Christians are being persecuted in the world right now. The cathedrals are being burned. People can't speak out, even in our own countries, guys. In a Christian country, you can't even make a Christian movie without being treated like a terrorist. I mean, the way they treated the Unplanned movie was ridiculous. In a Christian country, we're not in a Muslim country. We're not in Afghanistan. We're not in Yemen. We're not in Saudi Arabia. We're not in Africa. We're in one of the only white Christian nations left on the planet. And you can't even be Christian in your own country. That's a problem, guys. And the reason I talk about this stuff and I talk about the media is because the media is not just Islamic run. People talk about Islam, oh my God, Islam. And I defend Islam. Even Ilhan Omar, I don't like her. Every time she opens her mouth, I cringe. I can't really stand her. She's annoying to listen to. I don't trust her. I don't think she has good intentions at all. But I still will tell the truth on behalf of Muslims and even Ilhan Omar when right-wingers lie. That's fine. But if you want to explore ideology, most of influence in media is not even really Islamic. And I'm not even saying it's all Jews or it's Jewish people, but if you're allowed to explore and talk about Islam and blame all those, it's like you can't even have a conversation about this and I get attacked. And the reason I say this is not to be rude or be mean or be hateful. I love my Jewish brothers and sisters and I love my Israeli supporters and I protect them and defend them against people who hate on me. Like, why do you have so many friends? I'm like, guys, relax. I'm just trying to have a conversation. But the truth is, if you look at this stuff, I'll give you an example. And I don't hate, I just notice patterns. I talked about Christians being persecuted in mass media, which is obvious. And someone said to me, Daredevil, I think it was Daredevil season 3 anomaly, the whole thing makes the Christian or the Catholic Church look like the enemy, and it's all has like a Catholic antagonist, a Catholic bad guy. So I just tweeted, I didn't even know. I said, I just tweeted the Wikipedia and I said, look up just knock yourself out looking who wrote and produced the show. I tweeted that before I even looked. I looked, who's the executive producer? Is he Islamic? No. If he was Islamic, right-wingers would be freaking out and saying, oh my God, there's Islamic influence in Daredevil, and they're persecuting Christians and Catholics. He was Jewish, just like many writers are and many owners of media companies are. Jewish people are 1% to 2% of the population, and they have a huge, huge ownership in media. They have a huge, huge influence in media on the writing side, on almost every influence in media, especially on the production side. I'm not hating on it. I'm just pointing out a pattern, and I say this, and people say, anomaly, don't say it. Okay, so you'll point out Islamic influence, but you won't point out that pattern? And I'm not saying, people will say, well, anomaly, he's not a good Jew, he's not a real Jew, that's a left-wing Jew. I'm not saying that, but if the Catholic Church is using the Catholic Church to rape kids, I'm not going to sit there and say, oh, well, he's not a real Catholic, and, that doesn't matter. I'm going to say, yeah, he's not a real Catholic, but that needs to stop. If it's a Christian with a megachurch not paying taxes, doing all this stuff, I'm not going to stop you from having a conversation about that. I'll be like, fine, talk about whoever you want. If you want to talk about Joel Osteen, you could weigh in on it. I think he has good talks, but yeah, I guess he has big churches, and I'm sure maybe he could do more. I don't mind that you talk about it, but for some reason, right-wingers will attack and blame Islam all the time and are open about Islam influence. But when I mention the, amount of Jewish people in media and the fact that they're usually executive producing or writing a lot of these shows that are anti-Christian, nobody wants to talk about it. No one wants to weigh in on it. I'm not saying it's all the religion or all the people, but I'm noticing a pattern, and I'm noticing a pattern that I can't talk about. And the reason I say this is because it's even affecting Jewish people now. Laura Loomer, although I would say, to be honest, I follow her on Instagram and I've met her. She's cool. I consider her a friend, but I don't agree with everything she says. And I don't think everything she says is that great. I don't agree with death threats. I don't agree with incitement to violence, all that stuff. But point I'm getting to is the ADL. This is one of the first anti-free speech organizations in America. The ADL has gone on to attack Jews. The ADL has gone on to attack pretty much everybody right-wing. The ADL is stirring up the pot in America, attacking everybody's free speech constantly and calling them things that they're not. The ADL was founded in 1913. It's known by Wikipedia as an international Jewish non-governmental organization based in the U.S., founded by B'nai B'rith, the largest, oldest Jewish organization in the country or on the planet. I don't know. The point I'm getting to is the ADL is messing with our free speech now. They were founded in 1913. The reason I'm saying this is to not blame all people of that religion or ideology, but conservatives, all they do is talk about Islam. Islam's going to take our free speech away. It's Islam. It's all Islam. It's only Islam. Guys, they're not writing these anti-Christian shows. They're not writing these anti-Catholic shows. They're not behind all of the speech organizations. We could talk about CAIR, C-A-I-R, or CAR, however you say it. That's fine. I don't agree with them. I think they're absolutely probably not in our best interest. But to act like this is something that just started happening in the 80s or 90s or 2000s or 2010s or with Ilhan Omar, it's just disingenuous, because a lot of these speech organizations and a lot of these mass media who are anti-white and anti-Christian, they're Jewish owned. It's just true. I mean, Vox, V-O-X, if you ever read Vox, it seems like they hate white people, like, ruthlessly. Like, all of their stuff just seems very anti-white to me. It's like white people need to stop breathing air. White people need to stop polluting. It's like white people did this. It's one of the most racist news organizations I've ever read in my life. Vox. It's not owned by a white guy. It's owned by a Jewish guy, Ezra Klein. I'm sorry. It just is. It's like a lot of the anti-white, anti-Christian influence in media is coming from Jewish people. And I'm not saying that they're the right Jews. I'm not saying they're Orthodox Jews. I get it. They're not Ben Shapiro or PragerU Jewish people. But it just seems strange to me that right-wing Jewish people will attack me when I mention this stuff. I'll be like, guys, what are we going to do about this? Because it's not just Islam. It's Christians, it's Catholics, Jewish people have a huge influence, via their, and it's anomaly. You're saying that Jews own the whole media? No, I didn't say that. He literally, this Jewish, I think he's Jewish. If he's not Jewish, he's just freaking out. I said, Jewish people, atheists, leftists, Islam. Between that, there's no Christian influence in media. It's one of those 3 or 4 things. And he's like, you're saying all Jews own the media? I was like, dude, he's such a liar. He quoted and everyone's like, dude, the tweet's right there. He named 5 things, and you're focusing in on once. The reason I say this is because the anti-Christian agenda not only in media, not only in this country, not only in Europe, it's deeper than just Islam. And fighting Ilhan Omar is like punching a leaf and expecting to get to the root of the problem. And I'm just confused, guys, why in a Christian nation that making a Christian movie, you're a bad guy. If you're a Christian and you're in the music industry, you're a bad person. If you follow Christian, if you like in Muslim countries, I don't care that they don't support LGBT people. That's not my problem. I'm not going to go in there and be like, you need to support gay and lesbians. Like, I don't want to live there, so I don't need to micromanage how they treat gays and lesbians. I don't want them to throw them off buildings or hurt them, but if they want to ban it, it's not my problem. And here, and I'm not saying it to be mean, but here we have the opposite problem in Europe and America. You have leftists and liberals running rampant, telling everybody how to act. They're smashing cultures together, saying, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this, you have to do this, you have to do that, you can't talk bad about us. If you don't want transgenders, playing in the Olympics, then you're a horrible person, you hate gay people. And it's like, what are you talking about? I support transgenders. I just don't think biologically born men should be competing in the Olympics. I'm sorry. That doesn't mean I hate transgenders or I hate gay and lesbians. That just means I have a brain and you don't. Sorry. So you get what I'm saying? It's like, why would I worry about these countries when my country is subverted in 50,000 different ways to the point where you can't even have a conversation, that type of stuff. And the reason I say this is because this is a message to left-wingers. This is a very clear message to my Jewish brothers and sisters. The way you stop anti-Semitism and the way you stop hate, racism, and sexism is with self-awareness, self-accountability, and leading with the truth. If you lie, if you exaggerate, if you hate on everybody, if you censor, if you stifle conversation, it doesn't actually stop anti-Semitism or hate or sexism and bigotry. It increases anti-Semitism. Now I just say, hey guys, Jewish people are 1% to 2% of the population. I love them. I support them. They have good families. They have good ideology. They have good culture. They have good parenting. I'm not saying that they don't deserve to run everything, but I'm just saying there's that. And then you say, oh my God, that's anti-Semitic. You can't say that. You hate everybody. You think they run everything. I'm like, no. So that makes people more anti-Semitic because now that I can't even have an honest conversation about it, people see that and then they do think you're up to something as opposed to just facing that. Same with the left wing. It's like they're the most racist and sexist people I've ever seen in my life in America. It's all left wingers. I mean, there's definitely right wingers that suck too, but like left wing media in this country is more racist and sexist than extremists. I've never seen anything like it. But they somehow think they're fighting racism and sexism. And they're mashing cultures together. And they're telling that you can't think this way. And transgenders can play in sports. Making transgenders play in sports and saying that I'm not allowed to have a conversation about it, it doesn't make people hate LGBT people less. It makes people hate LGBT people more. It makes people look at Muslim countries and be like, well, at least they're not doing what we're doing. It's like, my Muslim friend said to me, for example, not to be harsh, but he said to me, in my country, we chop off hands of people who steal. He said, isn't that terrible? And I joked and I said, no, it sounds fine to me. I was kind of joking, but kind of being serious in the sense of, I said to him, I bet a lot of people don't steal there. And he said, yeah, we don't have that much theft. Yeah, because if you steal, which is a horrible thing to do, you steal from a neighbor, you steal from a store, your hands get chopped off. I mean, I get it. If someone's younger, I think there should be a strike rule. I'm not advocating for the chopping of hands, but you get what I'm saying? You go to Muslim countries, they say, no LGBT, we're not playing that, no stealing, we're not doing that, and it works out in first world Muslim nations. They don't have that much crime. Here, we're the exact opposite, where we're just saying, transgenders play sports, you're not allowed to agree with it, you can steal, you could commit crime, you could do anything, just like next level, like anything you can do, you could spread STDs, you could do all this stuff, that's all fine. It's like, am I going to spend my time hating on Muslim countries when I'm looking at my own country and being like, guys, this is disgusting. Like, this is gross. Like, we're messing up on every single level. So it's like, I'm focused on our country. You know what I'm saying? The great part about America is what it used to be is a democracy / a republic where you could be gay, but you weren't beating the crap out of women in sports. You could be transgender, you could be a cross-dresser, you could be lesbian and gay, but you weren't subverting mass media and hating on men and white people. Like, that's what it used to be. That's the great part about a Christian, free, democratic nation that's, open religiously. That's what we were founded on. Not just Christian, we were founded on freedom of religion. Even if you weren't Christian, you were allowed to be here. That was the great part about America. Leftists are ruining that. So we used to be the best combination of like, we're not too far, like Muslim, we're not chopping off people's hands and throwing them off buildings, but we're not beating the crap out of women in sports, and we're like losing families, and our culture's being destroyed, and our streets are being destroyed. So we need to go further right, but we can't go further right because you're called racist, you're called a Nazi, you're called anti-Semitism, you're called Islamophobia. So we can't get back to normal because of a lot of different things, mostly left-wingers, but to be honest, a lot of organizations that are founded by other religions besides Islam, like I just mentioned. So it's like, I want to talk about it all, and I want to do this to keep people safe, because you're not making Jewish people in this country safe if you can't have a conversation about that. You're endangering them. And now the hate's going to build. The rage is going to build. Disdain is going to build. And to be quite frank, reality is going to set in one way or another. And I don't want it to happen. But in Europe, yeah, cathedrals are going to fall. Yellow vesters are going to protest. It's only going to get worse until it gets better. So in the United States, leftists have a choice as far as either you let somebody like Trump finesse it and he makes deals with both sides and he does the right thing and he preserves our country and makes it better, or you could screw up, you could kick Trump out, you could try to get someone far left, and you could suffer the consequences of what happens when reality sets in. You're burying the working class, you're burying the people who founded this country, you're burying a majority of this country, you're silencing them, you're censoring them. The biggest religion in our country now can't even speak on mass media and can't even have a conversation, can't even have a seat at the table, and if you say anything about it, they have a word to shut you down. You're not anti-Christian if you critique Christianity. You're not anti-Catholicism if you critique pedophilia in the Catholic community. And I'm not saying that's all Catholics, but it exists and it needs to be talked about. So why in the world would I be Islamophobic when I want to have a conversation about Islam? And why in the world would I be anti-Semitic when I want to have a conversation about Judaism? It doesn't make sense, and it's by design. The original speech organizations in this country were created by Jewish organizations. They weren't created by Islamic organizations. And I don't care. It's not a knock to Judaism, but it's like, this is America. That's not what we do. We don't silence speech. We don't censor people. We don't give everybody a victim card except for the people who are being persecuted the most. That's not what we do here. And that's not what we're going to do here. And nobody's going to put up with it. Like, it's going to get ugly. And I don't want it to get ugly. I see extremists and I'm like, guys, relax. I see psycho people who hate on me and who hate on others and who say, Anomali, you're not even allowed to have friends, or you're not allowed to make peace. And it's like, no, you're wrong, but I'm going to speak the strong truth to protect people, because Europe, it's not like it's all going to get better just because you're lying about it in media. It's like, no, we're going to have hundreds of grenade attacks and we're going to let the city burn down and we're just going to keep subverting our people and we're going to turn the men into women and the women into men and we're going to make the Olympic, like, that's not leading to utopia, guys. You can ignore me. You could say I'm horrible and terrible, even though I'm not. I'm probably doing a better job than what you're doing at what I'm saying. In general, you could lie to yourself, but reality will set in. Like I say to people, my new saying is, if you lie to yourself, talk to God. Don't talk to me, because I'm busy. If you're lying to yourself, talk to God. Get right with God. You don't need to talk to me. We don't need to run in circles like a hamster on a wheel because you're too dishonest to even tell the truth to yourself. Talk to God. Find God. Find the truth, and then we'll come back, have a conversation. But we have to have these conversations about religion, about race, about gender, about ideology, about mass media. Figure out who's doing what and why. I don't care if it's an atheist white woman. I don't care if it's Christian white woman. I don't care if it's a Catholic white man. I don't care if it's a part Hispanic, mostly European person like myself. Like, you're not going to hurt my feelings. Like, no, Anomaly, don't talk about them because they're me. Like, I don't care. I don't care if it's somebody who looks exactly like me, like the queer eye for the straight guy. Have those conversations. I don't care if they're a real Jew or a fake Jew. I don't care if they're a real Muslim or a fake Muslim. I don't care. But I notice these patterns and I'm like, guys, something's going on. And right now, at this very moment, it's not Christian influence in the media. So if I'm not even allowed to talk about it, it's not going to work. And that's the conversation we're having today. So the Catholic Church, or the Catholic Cathedral in Notre Dame was burned down. I'm not blaming a specific race, religion, gender, group. I don't know if it was the janitor. I don't know if it burned itself down. I don't really care. I'm not saying I don't care. I do care. But in general, I want to have this conversation like I've had 50 million times. Separate to that, yes, that happened. Yes, it's horrible. Just like, the Christchurch shooting was horrible. And I agree with, honestly, I'm going to get into this in a second and lose more followers. But I agree with Ilhan Omar that in the sense, not on everything. I don't agree with her on much. She said when a tragedy happens and people did something, we lose our rights. It's the same like if I said Christchurch, that dude was like a psycho, white, nationalist, supremacist, communist. Like the dude was hella confused. He was like, I like communist China, but I like white people. It's like, all right, dude, figure your shit out. You're a psycho. But when he did something, that doesn't mean all right-wingers are responsible for that, and vice versa for Muslims or Judaism or Christianity or Catholicism. If a pope rapes somebody, that's not all Catholic people's fault. I agree with her in that sense, so I'm not saying this to blame everybody. I'm just trying to get to the core of the conversation so we can figure out what the heck is going on, who believes in what, who wants to do what, and then we could go where we want. Like if people don't want the LGBT community in their Muslim world, then they don't have to. We should have separate countries for separate ideologies. That's what the world is supposed to be. That's what states are supposed to be. Like, we're not supposed to subvert each other into this dystopian psycho world where nobody gets along. Like, that's why we had states. You go here. You go here. You don't agree with that? You go here. You don't like Christianity? You go there. You don't like, Judaism? You go there. You don't like Islam? You go there. And then we could all live peacefully and travel and hang out. It's like, I don't understand this. Like, everybody hates each other, but we're going to drag each other all over and we're going to fight wars in the Middle East against each other, and it's somehow going to work out. We need to have these conversations because Christianity, regardless, this is a symbol, which it is. Christianity is the most persecuted religion. Things like the Armenian genocide never get talked about in mass media, almost never, when millions of Christians were killed. The population of Christianity is not specifically growing quite as quick as Islam. It's just true. This is not a right-wing talking point. This is basic math and science. So much so that even left-wing news organizations say it. They say 48 out of 50 states aren't populating at a quick enough rate. It's like, yeah, we know. So the point I'm getting at is, Christianity is not doing very well as far as population. And the two countries, if you try to do what they're doing, and I'm not saying I have no idea who it is, left-wingers, Islam, these people in the media, if you do what they're doing in Muslim countries, you'd never get away with it. Like, they don't allow it. It's blasphemy. You're gonna reap the benefits. There's only a few Christian areas. Syria was like kind of Christian, and that's why I was so outspoken against that, because I'm like, what the heck's going on there? The story's not true. But Europe and America, I mean, yeah, you got Mexico, you have South America and stuff too, but two of the main countries where we do well on a world level, we're being crushed into submission. And it's like, if you say that, they call you all sorts of names, but people are just going to get more and more pissed. And I don't want people to get pissed. So I want people to be calm and rational and reasonable and live peacefully and understand that no group is a monolith. Every individual, race, religion, and gender has individuals. There's a lot of beefing in the Muslim world. There's a lot of beefing in the Jewish world. There's a lot of beefing in the Christian and Catholic world. That's okay, but I just don't like seeing Christian nations or Christian-founded nations being subverted and crushed into submission. All of the cathedrals burned down, and that happens. I'm not saying all of them, but this happened, and I don't know who did it. But it's like, I'm gonna have this conversation whether people want to or not. Second story of the day is definitely going to be just as, if not more,